This is an introduction to the prologue of the Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer. In the prologue to the Canterbury Tales, Chaucer introduces us to the season, spring, and the reason of pilgrimage to Canterbury Cathedral. The 29 previously unacquainted characters gather at the Tabard Inn in Southwark, just outside of London, for the purpose of making a 55-mile horseback ride together to the shrine of St. Thomas à Becket. In the prologue, Chaucer, the narrator, also introduces his purpose, which he says is to inform the reader of the state of every one of the 29 pilgrims, including who they were, their titles, occupations, mannerisms, their degree or rank in social hierarchy, and how they were arrayed, what they wore, how they appeared. It's important to note that Chaucer's purpose as a writer is different from his purpose as narrator. Chaucer's pilgrims come from all but the very highest and very lowest classes, thus representing a spectrum of medieval life. His road trip frame story allows these diverse characters to mingle, and allows Chaucer, the narrator, to tell us all about these characters, while Chaucer, the writer, is satirizing elements of all levels of medieval society. To understand Chaucer's satire, you should have a basic understanding of medieval social structure. Who were these pilgrims? Well, basically they represent three social classes. The old feudal system, which is represented by the knight, squire, yeoman, miller, and plowman. The clergy, represented by the prioress, monk, parson, summoner, and pardoner. The emerging middle class, represented by the merchant, franklin, clerk, physician, and the guildsman. And at the lower end of the middle class, the sailor and the cook. No too rich people and no too poor people, which adds to the realism. This graphic represents the power pyramid of the feudal structure in medieval England. Feudalism was based on the belief that the land belonged to God, but that kings, who ruled by divine right, could manage the land as they wish. Pope and church had the authority to judge against a king and depose or excommunicate him if they didn't like what he was doing. The king granted the land to nobles who pledged loyalty by swearing to serve and protect the king. The king also granted land to less powerful military men, knights, who are called vassals. The vassals agreed to fight for the king in exchange for that land. The land was worked by peasants or serfs who were at the bottom of the pyramid. They belonged to the land and could not leave without permission. The noble could also provide land to freemen like merchants, farmers, and tradesmen in exchange for services. The church had its own hierarchy. At the time that Chaucer wrote the Canterbury Tales, this feudal structure was starting to give way. In the mid-14th century, the bubonic plague wiped out roughly a quarter to a half of the English population. This decrease in population created economic opportunities and social mobility for the lower and middle classes. Reduced competition allowed both farmers and tradesmen to charge more for their goods and services. In the beginning of feudal times, this kind of social mobility was virtually non-existent. But by Chaucer's time, these middle-class workers could take advantage of opportunities to advance their social status. So how does Chaucer use this array of pilgrims to satirize English society as medieval times are just beginning to give way to the Renaissance? Well, first, let's understand what is satire. Satire is the use of humor, irony, exaggeration, or ridicule to expose and criticize stupidity, foibles, hypocrisy, vices, and/or corruption of individuals or institutions, particularly in the context of contemporary politics and other topical issues, and usually with the purpose of provoking thought and instigating improvements. Think The Daily Show. Chaucer's satire emerges through his brilliant characterization. So let's review characterization. Direct characterization, you'll recall, consists of direct statements that tell the reader what the character is like. For example, the miller was a stout churl, be it known, hardy and big of brawn and big of bone. So that tells you exactly what the guy looks like. Indirect characterization, on the other hand, reveals a character through their thoughts, actions, dialogue, and how other characters respond to him or her. Chaucer also subtly uses indirect characterization through the irony in his descriptions of how the characters appear, which contrasts sometimes with how they are supposed to behave. For example, the monk's attire contrasts with a monk's duty to renounce worldly life and goods. I saw his sleeves were purfled at the hand with fur of gray, the finest in the land. In this case, the monk's attire contrasts with a monk's duty to renounce worldly goods, and that reveals something about that character. Not all of Chaucer's depictions are satirical. So that we might better understand his satirical depictions, he also includes satiric norms. A satiric norm is a character representing the perfect ideal. We can see, by contrast, how bad everyone else by comparing them to the satiric norm. So is your pilgrim going to be satiric or a satiric norm? That's right, I said your pilgrim, because you have been assigned a pilgrim to teach to the class. Your job is to read and comprehend the literal description of your pilgrim, and to use your understanding of medieval social hierarchy and norms, as well as your understanding of satire, to interpret what Chaucer might be trying to imply about your pilgrim's character. Use the websites listed on the Canterbury Tales wiki if you need to do extra research. Here's some tips for understanding your pilgrim. Use modern English and rewrite Chaucer's description of your pilgrim. Use your fact file handout to help you keep track of the key details of dress, appearance, and behavior. Note details that contradict what the characters think of themselves or want others to think of them. Record your research about your pilgrim's job or position in life. Understand societal expectations of a person in your pilgrim's position. Compare societal expectations with the description of your pilgrim. And note the virtues and the faults of your pilgrim and try to draw conclusions about Chaucer's view of English society. So how will you present your pilgrim? Well, you're going to read to the class Chaucer's prologue description of the pilgrim. You'll share with the class your detailed study of your pilgrim so that the class will understand what Chaucer's description means and implies, and you'll tell the class the facts that they should understand about your character, what the difficult phrases and words mean, what Chaucer's opinion of the character is and how you know what his opinion is, and what key words, phrases, ironies, descriptions they should recognize in order to better understand your pilgrim. Oh, did I mention that your presentation must include a visual component such as a costume, a picture, a map, a chart? You can be creative with this, but remember that the purpose of your visual component is to enhance your classmates' understanding of your pilgrim and to demonstrate your understanding as well. So good luck, have fun, remember your presentation should not exceed 10 minutes in length, maybe 5 minutes is about right. Opt for quality over duration, but some of you have long pilgrims and some short. I'm just going to leave you with this final note of not so trivial Canterbury Tales trivia. By writing the book in common English instead of the Latin, which was the language of the church, or French, the fashionable language of the courts and elite society, Chaucer made his writing accessible to all strata of society, although most people were illiterate in his time. His book was unfinished at the time of his death, and yet its popularity ensured that more manuscripts of this book survived than of almost any other work of the time.